The great station of Vellora hung in the endless dark of space like a jewel of glass and steel. Its dome stretched high, lit by beams of silver light. Inside the largest dome stood the ascent tower, a structure so tall that its peak touched the glowing ceiling above. The tower was no ordinary construction. It shifted, it resisted, and it tested anyone who dared to climb it. It had been built by the mysterious founders long ago, and since then, no one had reached its top. The tower looked simple from far away, but as one came closer, the truth became clear. Its surface was not made of stone or metal but of living plates that moved and shifted at will. Some steps tilted as soon as they were touched. Some platforms rose and fell without warning. Strange lights flickered along its sides, sometimes revealing hidden paths and sometimes leading climbers to nowhere. Many had believed it was a puzzle, but it was more than that. It was a trial of mind, body, and spirit. Every day, crowds from across the station gathered to watch attempts. The audience filled long bridges and seats that surrounded the tower. They came from many different worlds: scaled beings with golden eyes, tall feathered warriors with wings folded tight, small gray engineers with bright hands that clicked when they spoke. They all came to see if today would be different, if today someone would rise higher than the rest. For weeks, the scene had been the same. Champions of powerful species had tried. The proud Ralkans with their armor-like skin had climbed fast at first, only to fall when the shifting platforms threw them off. The winged Arans had believed they could simply fly, but the tower had created storms of force that smashed them back down. Even the wise silent thinkers, known for solving impossible riddles, had failed when the tower spun illusions around them until they could no longer tell which way was up. Each failure brought laughter and wagers from the crowd. They had begun to treat the tower as a game rather than a serious test. The warriors would try, the crowd would cheer or mock, and then all would wait for the next attempt. The tower had become entertainment, and the failures had become expected. But beneath the surface of jokes and laughter, there was also a sense of unease. The ascent tower had been left by the founders, the ancient builders whose work still stood across the galaxy. Many wondered if this was not only a game but a message. Were the founders warning them that they were not ready for something greater? Or was this simply a challenge with a hidden reward at the top? No one knew. And because no one knew, the attempts continued, driven by pride and hope. One particular morning, the tower gleamed brighter than usual. A soft mist rose from its lower steps, and sparks of light ran along its sides. The crowd grew larger than ever before, filling every level of the viewing bridges. A scaled leader of the Ralkans shouted that today his people would prove themselves. A tall feathered warrior declared that this time they had trained enough to succeed. The crowd buzzed with excitement, ready to see another brave attempt. The first climber of the day was a Ralkan champion. His skin shone like polished stone, and his arms were thick with muscle. He began climbing with speed, his heavy hands gripping the shifting plates. At first it looked promising. He rose past the first twisting stair and moved onto the second set of platforms. But then the tower changed. The plates beneath his feet spun in circles, and before he could adjust, he lost his balance. With a heavy fall, he tumbled back to the ground. The crowd roared with laughter. Some cheered, others booed, and wagers were settled in minutes. Next came an Aran with wide wings spread. The crowd hushed as he rose into the air, gliding toward the higher levels. For a moment it seemed he would cheat the tower by flight alone. But then the winds came. Invisible storms of force burst from the sides, slamming him against the wall. His wings bent under the pressure, and he spiraled down, landing hard. The crowd gasped, then laughed again. Another failure, another fallen champion. As the day went on, more tried. A silent thinker moved with care, solving each puzzle step with sharp eyes. But the tower's illusions confused her, showing false paths that led her in circles. After hours, she gave up and returned to the ground, shaking her head in defeat. By the end of the day, The tower stood tall and untouched at the top, just as it always did. The crowd, though entertained, also felt the same old disappointment. None had reached high enough. None had even come close. For weeks, this was how it had been, and many began to believe that the tower could never be conquered. Still, they returned day after day, drawn by the chance to see someone try again. The tower was more than a challenge now. It was a mystery that pulled them in, a puzzle they could not walk away from. Somewhere high above, beyond all the shifting steps and hidden traps, lay an answer. The question was simple: who would be the first to reach it? That day ended like all the others, with failure echoing through the dome. The crowd left slowly, still talking, still guessing, still doubting. None of them knew that soon a human would step forward, and everything would change. The ascent tower had turned into more than a trial. It had become the heart of Vellora Station, a place where crowds gathered each day to watch and wonder. The dome that surrounded the tower could hold thousands, and almost every seat was filled. Long bridges stretched out from the walls, circling the tower so that every species could look down upon the climbers. Lights glowed in the air above, shifting in colors to match the mood of the crowd. Each morning, merchants lined the paths outside the dome, selling food, drinks, and small flags of their home worlds. Children ran through the lines, waving glowing sticks while their parents shouted prices for wagers. The sound of many voices filled the air: deep tones of the Ralkans, the high notes of the Arans, the clicking language of the small grey Yorians. It was no longer only a contest of climbing. It had grown into a festival. The tower itself stood silent, as if it did not care about the noise around it. The plates shimmered in the light, and mist drifted across its base. To those who watched, it seemed alive, almost aware of the attention it drew. Some believed the tower was testing not just the climbers but the watchers as well. Day after day, the audience came. They sat together though they were from different species, united by curiosity. They placed wagers on how far the next climber would reach. Some cheered for their own champions, while others enjoyed the failure of rivals. When a climber fell, the sound of laughter or groans echoed through the dome like rolling thunder. There were three groups in the audience. The first were the hopeful. They believed that someone would succeed, perhaps even that day. They watched with wide eyes, whispering predictions to one another. The second were the doubters. They came only for the entertainment, sure that the tower was unbeatable. To them, the tower was a stage, and the climbers were actors in a play of endless defeat. The last group were the thinkers. They studied the tower with careful eyes, trying to learn its secrets from afar. Some drew sketches, others recorded patterns, but all left with the same frustration. The tower changed too often, and no design could explain it. From the highest seats, leaders of worlds often watched in silence. They did not laugh like the common crowd. For them, the tower was not just a game. It was a mark of failure. Their strongest, their smartest, and their bravest had tried, and all had been cast down. Each defeat struck at their pride, but still they returned, unwilling to give up the chance of victory. One day, the Silent ambassador, a tall figure with long silver hair, spoke to a group of Ralkan generals as they sat together above the crowd. "We have sent warriors, thinkers, and even machines," she said softly. "Each has failed. Perhaps the founders built this tower not for us but against us." The Ralkan general growled in reply. His heavy shoulders shifted under his armor plates. "No test is without end. If the founders built it, then there must be a path. We are simply too blind to see it." Nearby, an Aran captain folded her wings and tilted her head. "Or perhaps it is not strength or wisdom that is required. Perhaps it is something else, something we have not yet tried." Their words faded into the noise of the crowd, but their doubts remained. The tower had broken the pride of many worlds, and yet it still stood untaken. As the days turned into weeks, stories spread through the station. Some whispered that the top of the tower held a weapon, left behind by the founders, powerful enough to command the stars. Others believed it was a message, a truth that would change the future of all who reached it. A few even thought the tower was alive, testing those who came near, waiting for one who was worthy. Despite these endless guesses, no one had an answer. The only truth they shared was that the tower remained unbeaten. And so the audience kept returning, hungry for the moment when something different might happen. On one particular evening, as the suns beyond the station set and painted the dome in shades of red and gold, the crowd grew restless. No climber had reached even a quarter of the tower that day. Many left their seats, shaking their heads and muttering that it was hopeless. But others stayed, their eyes still fixed on the glowing plates. They felt that change was near, though they could not explain why. Children asked their parents if someone would ever win. Merchants counted their coins from wagers. Leaders sat in silence, watching the tower shine against the dark. All waited, though none knew what for. The tower gave no answer. It stood unmoving, a silent challenge to all who dared. The audience left slowly that night, but the dome did not fall quiet. Whispers filled the halls, traveling from one voice to another. Stories grew larger, hopes grew smaller, and still the question remained the same. Who would be the one to climb where no one else could? The answer would not come from the proud Ralkans, nor the winged Arens, nor the wise silent thinkers. It would not come from the strongest nor the oldest. The answer would soon step forward from a place the crowd least expected from a human. The next morning on Valora Station began like many others. The ascent tower gleamed under the dome lights, mist curling around its base. Merchants opened their stalls, selling drinks and food to the early crowd. Children ran ahead, eager to find good seats, while adults placed wagers on which champion might try that day. The mood was the same as always, half excitement, half doubt. The crowd believed they had already seen the best of the galaxy. The Ralkans with their heavy armor like skin, the Arens with wings strong as sails, the silent thinkers with minds like sharpened crystal. All had tried, and all had failed. So when the next challenger stepped forward, the reaction was confusion, then disbelief, and finally laughter. It was a human. The name of the human was Aren. He looked small compared to the towering Ralkans or the tall Arens. His skin was soft, his body lean, and his clothes simple. He carried no armor, no weapons, and no special tools. To the crowd, he looked more like a worker than a warrior. Many whispered that this must be a mistake, that no human could stand against the tower. Humans were new among the stars. Their home world had only joined the Great Council a few years earlier. While they had shown skill in trade and invention, no one thought of them as strong or wise compared to the elder races. Their lives were short, their bodies fragile, their history untested. For this reason, most species saw humans as little more than curious newcomers, not true challengers for the trials of the galaxy. When Aren walked toward the base of the tower, the crowd began to murmur. Some laughed, nudging their neighbors, saying the climb would last only minutes. Others frowned, wondering why a human would even try. From the high seats, the leaders of several worlds exchanged looks of disbelief. The Ralkan general grunted, folding his arms. This is foolish. A human cannot last beyond the first step. The Cylon ambassador tilted her silver head. Perhaps. But sometimes foolishness is another name for courage. Aren did not look at the crowd. His eyes were fixed only on the tower. His steps were steady, his breathing calm. He placed one hand against the cool surface of the plates, as if to feel the tower's pulse, then began his climb. At first the crowd cheered, but not with support. They cheered in mockery, calling out how many steps he would last before falling. Children laughed and waved their glowing sticks, certain the attempt would end quickly. Even the merchants joined in the jokes, shouting that wagers would close within moments. The first steps of the tower tilted as Aren climbed, just as they had for all before him. The platforms shifted under his weight, trying to throw him off balance. But instead of rushing forward, Aaron paused. He bent low, adjusting his balance, moving with care. Where others had forced their way through with strength, he used patience. The crowd grew quieter. Aaron continued, step by step, never too fast, never too slow. His hands gripped firmly, his eyes studied each plate before moving to the next. The tower tilted again, harder this time, but Aaron leaned with the motion, almost as if he had expected it. From the seats above, the Aaron captain leaned forward, feathers rustling. Strange. He moves differently than the others. He listens to the tower. The silent ambassador nodded slightly. Yes. He does not fight it. He learns it. By the time Aaron reached the first turning stair, many in the crowd had stopped laughing. The mockery faded, replaced by surprise. He had already climbed higher than some of the proud champions. Aaron kept moving. He did not seem worried about the height or the shifting plates. Each step was chosen with care. His face showed focus, not fear. The crowd could see that he was not rushing to win. He was simply refusing to fall. As he rose, the mood in the dome changed. Some of the hopeful began to cheer, though softly at first, almost afraid to break the moment. The doubters frowned, whispering that it was only luck. The thinkers leaned forward, studying every motion he made, wondering if he had found a secret none of them had seen. When Aaron reached the second level, the tower released a wave of mist that curled around him. Many before had panicked at this, losing their grip in confusion. Aaron closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and waited for the mist to thin before climbing again. The crowd gasped at his calmness. By the time the suns outside the station shifted to afternoon light, Aaron was still climbing. The laughter had long since died away. Even the children who had once mocked him now sat quietly, their glowing sticks lowered. The merchants paused in their shouting. The leaders watched with new eyes, their disbelief fading into uneasy respect. For weeks, the audience had watched only failure. But now, for the first time, they saw something different. A human, small and fragile compared to the champions of the galaxy, was moving higher with every step. And though no one would admit it yet, a thought spread through the crowd like a spark through dry leaves. Perhaps this human would go farther than any before. The tower stood silent, its shifting plates waiting for the next move. Aaron lifted his hand, gripped the edge of the platform, and pulled himself higher. The crowd leaned forward as one. The climb had truly begun. The crowd inside the dome of Valora Station leaned forward as Aaron continued his climb. The human was small compared to the towering champions of other species, but there was something steady in his movements. Each step looked careful, each grip chosen with thought. The first part of the tower was known as the shifting stair. Many before had fallen here, thinking it was easy. The stair looked like a simple spiral made of wide stone steps, but the plates never stayed still. Some rotated in circles, others tilted the moment weight pressed down. The mistake most climbers made was rushing forward, believing speed would save them. But the faster they moved, the quicker the tower punished them. Aaron did not rush. He stepped onto the first stair and felt it move under his weight. Instead of panicking, he bent low and balanced himself. He let the stair finish its slow spin before shifting to the next. When the crowd saw this, they grew quiet. For weeks, they had seen champions charge across the stair only to be thrown off within minutes. Aaron was the first to treat it like a living opponent instead of a dead structure. From the upper seats, the silent ambassador whispered, "He studies it. He waits until the tower shows its rhythm before moving." The Ralkan general grunted. "It will not matter. The higher he climbs, the harder the tower becomes." Still, the crowd kept watching. The second stair was narrower, and the plates shifted faster. A wrong step here meant a fall. Aaron paused again, pressing his palm against the side of the tower, as if listening to the hum within the plates. Then he moved, not with power but with balance. His foot landed at the exact moment the plate leveled. He crossed 3 more before stopping again. Each pause made the audience nervous, but they began to see the reason. Aaron was not fighting the tower. He was learning it. Children who had once laughed now pulled at their parents' sleeves, whispering, "He is not falling." The merchants who usually shouted wagers were silent, their hands frozen over their coins. By the time Aaron reached the first wide platform, the mist around the stair cleared. He stood tall for a moment, catching his breath, and then looked upward. The crowd let out a sound like a single breath. He had climbed higher than many champions already. The next part of the tower was called the puzzle path. Here, the plates were no longer steps but tiles that glowed with shifting light. Some tiles were solid, others vanished when stepped on. The trick was knowing which ones were real. The errands had failed here, thinking they could leap across, only to be caught by sudden winds. The silent thinkers had tried to solve patterns, but the tower changed them too quickly. No one had crossed more than half the path. Aaron knelt and studied the first row of tiles. The crowd waited, some expecting him to fall at once. Instead, he crouched low and pressed a hand against one tile. It held solid. He pressed another, and it vanished, leaving only empty air. Slowly, he tapped each tile with his hand before stepping forward. The puzzle path stretched long and wide, but Aaron did not hurry. He crawled, balanced, and tested every step before moving. When he found a safe tile, he shifted his weight and advanced. To the crowd, it looked slow, but it was steady. Every moment built a rhythm, and every tile was a victory. A murmur spread through the audience. Many had believed humans were reckless by nature, always rushing into trouble. But here was one showing patience greater than the wisest Cylon. Some began to cheer, not with mockery but with honest support. The Ralkan general shook his head. This proves nothing. The tower grows crueler with height. He will fall soon enough. But the Cylon ambassador smiled faintly. Perhaps. Or perhaps he will reach farther than any of us thought possible. When Aaron reached the middle of the puzzle path, the tower shifted again. Tiles began to flash and change places, moving faster than before. Gasps filled the dome. Many thought this was the end. But Aaron did not panic. He stopped moving and crouched low, watching the rhythm. He waited until the tiles slowed again, then placed his foot with care. The crowd let out a cheer as he continued forward. Minutes turned to hours. The audience forgot to eat, forgot to speak, even forgot to breathe at times. Every move of the human held their eyes. When Aaron finally stepped off the puzzle path and onto the next platform, the dome shook with applause. For the first time in weeks, the sound was not mocking laughter but true cheering. Aaron stood on the platform, sweat on his face, his hands scraped from the rough plates. He looked tired, but his eyes stayed fixed upward. He had climbed higher than most and was not stopping. The tower loomed above, filled with storms, illusions, and countless traps. Yet the human did not look afraid. To him, each challenge was another step. The crowd leaned forward again, their voices rising together. They had come expecting another failure, but now they wondered if they were seeing the beginning of something far greater. And as Aaron placed his hand on the next edge and began to climb again, one thought echoed in every mind within the dome. The human might actually make it. The dome of Valora station was silent except for the sound of Aaron's movements. The human had already crossed the shifting stair and the puzzle path, climbing farther than many champions before him. Now he faced the middle heights of the Ascend Tower, a place where strength alone had never been enough. The next section was called the Wall of Mirrors. From the ground it looked like a smooth surface of silver that stretched high without handholds. As Aaron stepped onto the narrow ledge before it, the wall rippled. Reflections appeared, dozens of copies of him moving at once. Some climbed, some fell, some stood still. The tower created illusions to confuse the mind, and many before had lost themselves here. The Ralkan champions had tried to smash through the wall with brute force, but they had only been thrown down. The silent thinkers had tried to study patterns of light, but the wall changed too quickly. Even the Arans with their sharp sight had been fooled by false paths. Aran placed his hand on the wall. The reflection of his hand touched back, then rippled and split into 10 more. He took a step upward, and one reflection followed correctly while the others climbed in strange directions. The crowd held its breath, wondering if he would be trapped like the rest. But instead of chasing the true reflection, Aran closed his eyes. He pressed his palms against the cold surface, feeling the texture with his skin. Then he began to climb, blind to the illusions. His fingers found shallow grooves that others had missed. His feet pressed against hidden ridges. By shutting out the trick of sight, he trusted his touch and balance. The crowd gasped. They had never seen anyone ignore the illusions. Some whispered in amazement, others shouted in disbelief. From the high seats, the Aran captain leaned forward, feathers trembling. He denies the tower's lies. He climbs not with eyes but with instinct. The silent ambassador spoke softly, her silver hair shining in the dome light. He understands that the mind can be tricked, but the body does not lie. This is his way. Step by step, Aran climbed the wall of mirrors. His eyes remained shut, but his movements were steady. Sweat rolled down his face, his arms shook from effort, yet he never opened his eyes. When he finally reached the ledge at the top and pulled himself up, the dome erupted with cheers. The sound was different now. No laughter, no mockery. It was the sound of respect. For the first time, the audience began to believe. But the tower was far from finished. Above the wall of mirrors waited the storm platforms. Great discs of metal hung in the air, connected by beams of light. Between them swirled winds of energy, strong enough to knock a climber into the void. The Arans had thought their wings would save them, but the storms had crushed them. The Ralkans had tried to leap, but their weight dragged them down. Aran stood at the edge of the first platform, staring at the storm. His hair blew wildly as the winds howled. The crowd grew silent again, knowing many had fallen here. He crouched low, studying the movement of the winds. They were not random. They came in waves, surging, then resting, then surging again. While others had tried to fight through at the wrong moment, Aran waited. He crouched for a long time, unmoving, while the storm raged. Finally, when the winds dropped for a brief instant, he leapt forward. His hands caught the edge of the second platform, and he pulled himself up before the storm rose again. The crowd cheered in shock. He repeated this again and again, waiting for the rhythm of the storm before moving. Sometimes he crawled low to the ground, pressing his body flat so the winds passed over him. Other times he clung to the side of a platform, letting the storm rush past before swinging up. Every move showed not strength alone but patience and timing. By the time he reached the last storm platform, even the doubters could no longer deny his skill. The Ralkan general sat stiff in his seat, his heavy arms crossed. The Aran captain's eyes were wide, unable to hide her respect. The silent ambassador smiled faintly, whispering, "The human changes everything." The crowd erupted as Aran pulled himself onto the final ledge of the storm platforms. He knelt there, chest heaving, arms shaking, but his eyes still lifted upward. Above him stretched the last heights of the tower, where no one had ever reached before. The dome of Vellora shook with cheers. Children waved their glowing sticks, merchants shouted with excitement instead of wagers, and leaders who once doubted now leaned forward, unable to look away. Aran had climbed not with power, not with speed, but with something no one had expected. He had climbed with patience, balance, and a refusal to surrender. His approach was unlike any champion before him. The tower had stood unbeaten for ages, yet now a human had reached higher than anyone in living memory. The crowd knew they were witnessing something historic. Aaron rose to his feet, sweat dripping down his face. His body trembled, but his eyes remained calm. He touched the rough surface of the tower once more, then began to climb again. The audience followed his every move with their hearts racing. For the first time since the challenge began, they no longer asked whether someone would succeed. They asked only one question. Could the human truly reach the top? The dome of Valora Station was so silent that even the sound of Aaron's breathing could almost be heard. The human had passed the shifting stair, the puzzle path, the wall of mirrors, and the storm platforms. Each step had proven that he was different, that he approached the tower not with raw strength but with patience and focus. Now he stood at the edge of the highest section, where no champion had ever reached before. The upper heights of the ascent tower were feared even by the bravest. From the ground, this part of the tower looked like a storm frozen in place. Jagged platforms floated in the air, surrounded by lightning that arched between them. Illusions shifted in the mist, showing false paths and false summits. The air itself seemed heavy, pressing down on anyone who entered. Many believed the founders had placed the final challenges here to break both the body and the spirit. Aaron's clothes were torn, his hands bleeding from rough edges, his face pale with exhaustion. Yet his eyes still carried the same steady light. He touched the surface of the nearest platform, then climbed onto it. At once, the storm roared to life. Lightning cracked across the dome, thunder shaking the seats of the crowd. The people gasped as the human disappeared into the storm. The first trial was the storm bridge. Thin beams of light stretched between platforms, flickering as if they might vanish at any moment. Aaron crouched low and placed one foot on the beam. It trembled under his weight, but it held. Slowly he stepped forward, arms spread wide for balance. Lightning burst across the storm, blinding the crowd, yet Aaron did not stop. When the beam shook, he bent low and waited for it to steady. When the lightning flashed, he closed his eyes and trusted his steps. Inch by inch, he crossed the bridge and reached the next platform. The audience erupted with cheers that shook the dome. The second trial was the maze of illusions. The mist thickened until the human seemed lost within a cloud. To the audience, dozens of false images of Aaron appeared, each moving in different directions. Some walked upward, others fell screaming, others vanished into the mist. It was impossible to tell which was real. But the true Aaron did not chase after the illusions. He crouched, pressed his palm to the ground, and listened. He knew the tower was trying to trick his eyes and ears, but he trusted the steady rhythm he had followed since the first step. Slowly he walked forward, ignoring the shifting shapes around him. Every few steps, he tested the floor with his hands. The crowd held its breath, unsure if he was still on the right path. Then, at last, he stepped out of the mist and stood tall on the far side of the maze. The cheer that rose this time was louder than thunder. But the tower had one final test. Above Aaron loomed the last climb. The platforms tilted violently, rising and falling as if alive. Lightning struck across them, and the winds howled with a force that could throw a body into the dark below. Many in the crowd whispered that this was impossible, that no living being could survive this climb. Yet Aaron stepped forward without hesitation. He leapt to the first platform, his body nearly thrown aside by the storm. He bent low, gripping the edge until the wind eased, then pulled himself upward. The second platform rose suddenly like a wave. Aaron jumped, catching its side just as lightning flashed. His hands burned, but he did not let go. He hauled himself onto it, breath ragged but steady. The storm grew fiercer. The platforms shook harder. His arms trembled, his body screamed in pain, but his eyes never looked down. He looked only up. Every step showed the same refusal to quit. When the wind slammed into him, he clung tighter. When the lightning flashed, he waited and moved again. From the highest seats, the Ralkan general had risen to his feet. His face was hard, but his eyes showed something new: respect. The errand captain gripped the rail before her, wings trembling with excitement. The silent ambassador's silver eyes glowed with quiet wonder. None of them spoke. None of them could. The crowd was no longer divided into doubters and believers. All were united now, hearts beating with every step of the human. Children shouted his name. Merchants forgot their coins. Even the guards along the dome walls leaned forward, watching with wide eyes. At last, Aaron reached the final platform. The storm roared louder than ever, as if the tower itself was trying to stop him. Lightning crashed at his feet, the winds howled like a beast, and the platform shook beneath him. Aaron's body swayed, almost ready to fall. But then he planted his hands, pulled with every bit of strength left in him, and dragged himself onto the summit. For the first time in living memory, a climber stood at the top of the ascent tower. The dome exploded with sound. Shouts, cheers, and cries of disbelief filled the air. Some fell to their knees, others raised their arms high, and all looked upward at the small human who had done what none of them had thought possible. Aaron stood tall despite the storm raging around him. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, but his eyes looked calm. For weeks, the galaxy had watched failure. In a single day, a human had reached the top. And in that moment, everyone in the dome knew the truth. The tower had not been unconquerable. It had simply been waiting for the one who would never give up. The dome of Valora Station was alive with cheers that shook the walls. The crowd had never seen anything like this. For weeks, they had watched champion after champion fail. They had grown used to laughter, to wagers, and to the quiet disappointment that came when yet another climber fell. Now, a human stood at the very top of the ascent tower, arms raised in quiet triumph. Aaron, the human, did not shout. He did not wave. He simply stood tall, breathing heavily but steady, looking at the vast expanse of platforms, storms, and illusions below. The tower, which had seemed impossible to every other species, had yielded to him. He had reached the top, not through brute strength or clever tricks, but through patience, balance, and endurance. The crowd below was silent for a moment, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Then, the sounds erupted again, louder than before. Children cheered and waved sticks of glowing light. Merchants shouted in joy, forgetting wagers and coins. Leaders rose to their feet, some nodding in respect, others rubbing their faces in disbelief. Even the Ralkan general, who had scorned the human at the start, gave a slow, approving nod. The errands whispered among themselves, feathers rustling. "He is not strong like us, yet he climbed higher than any of our best," one said. Another shook his head. "It is his spirit, not his body, that gave him victory." The silent ambassador looked at the human with quiet awe. "We believed knowledge alone could conquer the tower," she said softly. "We believed strength and skill could win. But he has shown something we have long forgotten. Persistence and courage can surpass all else." Aaron looked down at the shifting platforms, the maze of illusions, and the storm bridges he had crossed. Each step had tested him, yet he had endured. He had learned to listen to the tower, to watch its movements, and to trust himself. Every platform, every trap, every illusion had been a challenge, and he had met them all. The crowd began to understand a truth that had never been obvious before. It was not enough to be the strongest, the fastest, or the smartest. The human had shown that determination and patience could outmatch brute force, speed, and wisdom. Where others had failed, he had adapted. Where others had given up, he had endured. And that endurance had brought him victory. As Aaron stepped carefully to the very tip of the tower, the dome seemed to shimmer in acknowledgement. Beams of light reflected off the shifting plates, casting a glow across the entire station. The audience felt a sense of pride mixed with awe. They had witnessed something that would be remembered for generations. The Ralkan general spoke aloud, his voice carrying across the upper seats. We have learned a lesson today. Strength alone does not guarantee success. There is more to victory than force or pride. A human has shown us what it means to endure. The Erin's captain folded her wings and smiled faintly. Perhaps we have been wrong to underestimate the humans. Their lives are short, yet they carry courage and resolve unlike any we have seen. Even the smallest voices in the crowd, the children, understood. They had watched a human climb higher than the greatest champions. They realized that anyone, no matter how small or fragile, could achieve great things if they refused to give up. Aaron lowered his arms and looked around at the faces below. He did not speak, but his presence alone told the story. It was a story of hope, courage, and the power of persistence. The message was clear to all who watched: no matter the obstacle, no matter the doubt, one could reach heights that seemed impossible. The Ascent Tower had stood for centuries, unbeaten and mysterious. Many had thought it unconquerable, and many had left believing they were too weak, too small, or too limited to succeed. Now, everything had changed. Humanity had proven itself in a way that could not be ignored. Leaders of the worlds whispered among themselves, realizing a new truth. The races that had long ruled the stars now saw that power could take many forms. It was not always the strongest, the fastest, or the oldest who would rise. Sometimes, it was the one who refused to quit, the one who met each challenge with steady resolve, the one who believed that persistence was greater than pride. As the sun beyond the station shifted, casting golden light across the dome, the audience slowly began to leave. But the lessons of the day lingered in their minds. Stories would be told. Children would grow up hearing of the human who reached the top in a single day. Merchants would recount the climb for decades. Scholars would study the tactics, the patience, and the courage that made victory possible. And at the very top of the Ascent Tower, Aaron stood quietly, looking at the stars beyond the dome. The wind whipped around him, the lightning still danced, but he felt calm. He had done what many thought impossible. He had climbed higher than anyone else. The human had proven that limitations existed only in the mind. The crowd had watched failure for weeks, yet a single human had changed their perspective forever. Vellora Station had learned a lesson about courage, determination, and the unyielding spirit of humanity. In the days that followed, the Ascent Tower would never again be seen in the same way. Champions would return, but now they carried a new understanding. They knew that reaching the top was not only a matter of power or skill. It was a matter of heart. And for humanity, the climb was more than a victory. It was proof that even the smallest could rise higher than the tallest, that patience and courage could surpass strength, and that a single step forward could change the way the galaxy saw them forever.